The Tom Woods Show, episode 703.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
If you're a homeschooling parent and you're tired of running yourself ragged, then check out the self-taught Ron Paul curriculum. And check it out through my special link where you get 3 free bonuses totaling $160. My special link? RonPaulHomeschool.com. Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. Very pleased to be talking to Vox Day here on the show. Hard to categorize Vox Day because he does so darn many things. We're going to be talking in particular today about his book, SJWs Always Lie, Taking Down the Thought Police. SJW, of course, is an acronym for Social Justice Warrior. I know most of you know that, but not all of you, because I do have people asking me once in a while, what does that stand for? So that's what we're talking about. SJWs Always Lie, Taking Down the Thought Police. Very, very interesting book. Linked, of course, at tomwoods.com/703. Vox is the publisher of the popular Vox Populi blog. You can find that at Vox Day. That's VOXDAY. VoxDay.blogspot.com. He's also the author of the book Return of the Great Depression. So he's written on economics. He's written on conservatism, on progressivism, on the social justice warrior phenomenon. He's a novelist as well. He's accomplished in science fiction and fantasy. He's also a computer game designer, so he does an awful lot of things, and he's a very, very interesting guy to talk to. Vox, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tom. It's always good to talk to you.
SJWs Always Lie. That's such a great title. And let me start off by saying a couple things, because I've got a few listeners who have actually written to complain about my use of that term. They say, I'm trying to introduce certain people to your podcast, and I think if you are using that type of language, it's just going to turn them off. And I want to say a couple things. First of all, I don't like the term social justice warrior because it actually makes them sound sort of respectable, that they believe in something and they're going to be warriors for it. I don't like that. I want to make them sound completely disreputable. But I use the term because everybody uses it, but it wouldn't have been my preference. I would have chosen something far more derogatory. Secondly, in terms of whether I should use it so I don't alienate people or not, if I'm talking about communism, I'm going to say that's an evil system. I'm not going to say, well, there's a possibility somebody is sharing the episode with his Marxist friend. I can't worry about that. At some level, you have to, well, you have to call a spade a spade. Let me be as insensitive as I can be. I mean, you have to speak the truth. And these people are not just people who just care about justice, but they've just gone a little bit wrong, or they just want to have everybody feel comfortable, but they're just going about it the wrong way. That is absolutely not the way I see it. These people cannot be redeemed. They are horrible people. They are a threat to a free society, and I'm not going to kowtow to anybody on that front. They need to be beaten back as effectively as possible. That they're, and I'm not trying to convert them, because 1 out of 500 million of them can be converted. So in other words, if I spend all my time, I might be able to get 16 conversions if the entire earth listens. Not worth it.
Well, I think there's a certain contradiction there in even what you're saying. If the term is not effective, then why would anyone take offense to it? If the term is positive, then how could anybody possibly object to being described as such? I
get that. It's just that I think it's calling them warrior. I don't want to. I think they're actually, I don't know. Anyway, I could come up with some really derogatory term. I just feel like it's too complimentary. Even if they still say it's insulting, I guess my view is it's not insulting enough. I guess on this, I can't be appeased.
But that's something that Chapter 10 deals with. What you are doing is you're attempting to dialectically analyze a rhetorical term. And that is not really the right way. It's not the right way to look at things at all. Essentially what you're doing is you're attempting to analyze a Chinese term in an English sense. Rhetoric is only about the emotional impact it has on people. It doesn't deal with information at all. And so it doesn't deal with logical, factual information at all. And so the fact of the matter, there's this comes up fairly frequently than it did when the book first came out. But you would see people say, well, I don't call them social justice warriors. I call them social justice whiners or whatever. And the thing is that the more derogatory term is a less effective, a less rhetorically effective term, because they don't feel that it applies to them. The SJW does not feel that he's a whiner. And so what affects them, the reason that the term is so effective, is that when they hear people using the term with contempt, dripping off their chin, and they identify with the term, that's when the maximum emotional effect takes place. And so what's happened is that regardless of the meaning of the term, the essence is so rejected that the term has become negative. It's much in the same way that, the way that blacks or previously African Americans, previously Afro-Americans, previously Negroes are constantly changing what term is offensive or not offensive. It's because, the core problem is that they don't like being identified as a separate racial identity. It doesn't matter what the term is. Over time, the perception of the term is colored by its meaning. And that's what's happened with SJW.
I still feel like the average person who is innocent of all political knowledge, hearing a term that has warrior and justice in it, might think, oh, well, that sounds admirable. I just don't want them to sound admirable. It's a trivial point. I want to get onto the more substantial point, which is, this book of yours is, I don't think I've ever read anything quite like it. And it just kept getting more and more, I don't want to say outrageous because that would sound like I disagree with it, but as I thought, okay, how's he going to top this chapter? And then you would each time. So first of all, what are the ideological preconceptions that these people hold? And then I want to talk about the tactics they use to try to force these ideas on everybody.
Well, their core ideology, it has its roots in John Stuart Mill. And that's actually where I got the term SJW convergence from, which we can discuss later. But essentially, their core ideology revolves around tolerance, equality, progress, and inclusion. And I think the acronym actually worked out TEPID. I'm trying to remember what D stood for. Diversity. And so those 5 elements are their core ideology. But what's important to understand is that what they mean by tolerance is not necessarily what the dictionary defines as tolerance. What they mean by diversity is not what the dictionary defines as diversity. It is their highly refined, very particular definition of those things where, their tolerance is actually highly intolerant. Their diversity is absolutely non-diverse when it comes to intellectual opinions and so forth. But that TEPID acronym essentially describes their core ideology. If you scratch an SJW, you're going to find something related to those things. However, it's important to remember that their ideology is fundamentally dynamic. It is constantly changing. It's what we talk about when we say the SJW narrative. The best way to think about SJWs is like a school of fish. They're all moving together in sync, and then suddenly they all shift to the right or to the left or up or down. And they're all very aware of what the others are doing and thinking so that they can move in time with that. Because the one thing that terrifies the SJW more than anything else is to turn right when all the other SJWs turn left. Suddenly he's out of sync with the narrative, and they will turn on him and attack him just as mercilessly as they would attack a non-SJW.
So what are the sorts of things, give me an example of somebody who ran afoul of the SJWs and not only ran afoul of them, but then responded in precisely the wrong way. And what was the outcome?
Well, one of the examples from the book I think is the most tragic is Sir Tim Hunt. He is not an SJW, but he's also no arch conservative or anything. He's not very political at all. He's a Nobel laureate. A man of great accomplishment, and he was giving a speech in Korea, and he just happened to make a minor joke about women in the laboratory. And this is a guy who, it came out, has actually been very supportive of women in science, and has, in fact, he was, speaking at a conference that was related to women in science. And what happened was that he was sandbagged by an SJW who really falsely characterized and exaggerated some of the comments that he made to make him look like this, outrageous sexist who didn't think that women should be allowed in the laboratory. And because he was traveling from Korea, he had no chance to respond to it. And by the time he had landed, SJWs at his academic institution had already put pressure on his wife, and she ended up leaning on him encouraging him to resign, thinking that they had a deal where he would just resign and the whole thing would be kept quiet. And then, of course, the SJWs always need to parade their scalps and show off their trophies. So the institution promptly announced that it had, caused him to resign, and he ended up getting kicked off of several some other academic sort of honorary seats and so forth. And it was really sad because the guy and his wife clearly had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that they were going to be the target of a global media campaign against him, and he was completely unready for it.
As are most normal people, because most normal people don't think or act this way, or they think if I apologize, these people will be happy. It has nothing to do with him as an individual. What it has to do with, as you say in your book, is making an example of him so as to terrify everybody else. And boy, a lot of people, they get right in line. And as you point out, and as I've pointed out, people don't like to be called haters or, whatever. People, they just don't like being cast in a bad light when they know themselves and they know that they're decent people. So their natural instinct is to protest, and then their natural instinct becomes, I'm not going to say anything in the first place that could even slightly be misinterpreted by these people. So it puts everyone in a state of constant terror. Now, what about, I can imagine libertarians coming back and saying, and this happens to me all the time. When I criticize any private institution, I get told, well, they have the right to do that. Yeah, I get that. Can we just say, for now, this is episode 703. I'm just going to call it the episode 703 principle so that I never have to refer to it again. I get that a place can hire and fire as they wish. That's not the point. I can still criticize them, but yet let's try and take that objection seriously. Why should a libertarian, and I'm not saying, and I know you wouldn't describe yourself as a libertarian, but my audience is, why should a libertarian care about this if really all we're dealing with is a bunch of private employers who have the right to be pig-headed and oppressive if they want to?
Well, first of all, I would point out that the statement is false, not only in the USA, but in the rest of the world. Employers no longer have the right to hire and fire whoever they want. I mean, it's fine and dandy to talk about how, in your imaginary, ideal intellectual world, everybody's got that right. But in the actual world we inhabit and in the legal systems we actually live in, well, that's simply not true. You can and you will. Corporations have certain rules that they have to abide by and laws they have to abide by. And some of the things that are protected are related to the individual's speech rights. So the employer doesn't necessarily have the right to do that. But more importantly, the reason it matters is because the whole program of social pressure has been one way. Like, for example, you even see people trying to argue that Twitter had the right to kick Milo Yiannopoulos off of Twitter because they didn't like what he was saying, because it's a private institution. And yet, these are the very same people who are applauding the fact that a Christian bakery was fined hundreds of thousands of dollars and is being forced to, bake a wedding cake for a homosexual couple. And then there's another case with a floral studio, I believe, a flower shop. And so, it's not correct to pretend that we're living in a society or a legal framework where everyone is treated equally. And so, given where we are, given the fact that we are caught up in a very vicious cultural war that has really only been fought by one side for the past 20 to 30 years. It's not appropriate to pretend that cultural war does not exist.
You mentioned Milo, who wrote the foreword to your book. I posted a number of tweets relating to his ousting from Twitter, and I was responding to people who were especially hysterical about this, saying that people like Milo, this was a black woman, she's saying he's trying to keep black women off the internet, which I don't know where that's coming from, but he's trying to keep black women off the internet. So I responded and said, and yet, funny thing is, no black women have actually been driven from the internet, and yet Milo was driven from Twitter. You don't think there's maybe a little hysteria going on here that we might want to ratchet down? I think the reason they respond to him the way they do is not just for his provocative style. It's for what he represents. He's somebody who, he doesn't just answer them. He causes them to be objects of laughter and ridicule, which is something they don't know how to cope with, because these are the people with the least sense of humor of anyone who ever lived, as far as I can see.
Well, it's more than that. The reason that Milo's a target, the reason that I'm a target, the reason that you're a target is because all of us have at various points in time stood up to the cultural left. And that is something that they really cannot allow to stand without, they can't just ignore it and let it pass, because every time somebody stands up to them, then 10 other people realize that it's possible. Like you were talking about earlier, one of their goals is to instill a state of fear so that people muzzle themselves, so that they don't even have to be muzzled by the SJWs, so that no one is speaking any of the crime think that might be taking place. And so the more that people see people like Milo running amok, the more that they see me standing up and saying things that are deemed unacceptable, the more that you're talking about things that the left does not approve of or want people to hear. The more people realize that they can speak up too. I mean, look at my blog just yesterday passed 100,000 page views for the day for the first time. That's terrifying to them, because every single person who's visiting that site is, being bathed in this crime think that they want to stamp out. And it makes other people much more likely to stand up against them. And so that's really what's driving their campaign against Milo. That's why he was kicked off Instagram, even though he didn't do anything on Instagram. That's why I was kicked off Goodreads. That's why eventually we're going to be introducing a whole number of alternative social media structures, simply because they cannot permit the outspoken and fearless right to even be present on their social media, because we are much more convincing than they are.
And again, I want to emphasize, we're not dealing with, I have people I talk about on the show who, let's say, disagree with me on some aspect of economic policy. Well, I mean, you disagree with me on some aspect.
Sure.
But so what we normal people think is, well, maybe someday we could sit down and try and hash that out. And I think a lot of people who are naive and not really aware of what we're dealing with here think that the SJWs are the same way. They're just a little bit outspoken. But if we could all just sit down with them, and if Woods wouldn't use inflammatory language, maybe we might get somewhere. What's wrong with that?
Well, that's fundamentally the moderate perspective. I mean, to be honest, I have a lot of contempt for moderates, because they like nothing better than shooting at their own side. A lot of the people who feel comfortable criticizing you, people who are on the right who criticize you, have probably never said boo to anyone on the left, and so the moderate loves to engage in criticism and backseat driving, and he's always happiest shooting at his own side. So I just don't, I'm not sure that you can convince a lot of those people otherwise, because they're not being driven by any, they're really being driven by their split the difference personalities, more than the idea that they can actually convince the SJWs of anything. I think deep down, most of those people know very well that the SJWs can't be convinced. I think that they want to talk you into playing nice, just so with the idea that maybe we can all pretend that this cultural war is not taking place.
What are the various steps, and you don't have to say too much about any one of them, that we can expect to see in an SJW campaign against an individual or an institution? It seems to, as you point out in your book, follow a certain pattern.
Yeah, in fact, if you go to my blog at Vox Populi, there is a free SJW attack guide, and it actually it's actually in, it's actually in 5 different languages. I think we've got English, Spanish, German, Portuguese, and 4 different languages anyhow.
Well, even having it in German in the first place is a crime of some kind, probably.
Probably. But anyhow, there's 8 stages of an SJW attack sequence. The first one is to locate or create a violation of the narrative. And remember, the narrative is always shifting, so it's very easy for them to create a violation of it. Number 2 is point and shriek. Number 3 is isolate and swarm. They're always intent on cutting off their target from any emotional support that might be offered. That's why it's so important whenever you see somebody being attacked by SJWs to immediately get in contact with them and offer support and make sure they understand that they're not alone. The 4th stage is reject and transform. And what that refers to is the apology. If you apologize, they will always reject your apologize, and they'll transform your apology into proof of your guilt. Why would you be apologizing if you weren't guilty of the crime? The 5th stage is press for surrender. The 6th stage is appeal to amenable authority. The 7th stage is the show trial, and then finally is the victory parade, where they parade the head of their target around and point out to all the other SJWs what they did.
All right, so as this is going on, suppose you are the victim of this.
Right.
Suppose you've been attacked. Now, it's somebody like you and me, we expect to be the victims of this. But let's just say you're the average person, you're working for some corporation, and you tweeted something out or something, and somebody reported you to your boss. Let's say it's something like that. So you really aren't expecting to be made a target. Right. And you get that terrifying call into the office and close the door and sit down. We have something important to talk about. How should you take things from there?
In that SJW attack guide, which again I point out is free, you don't have to buy the book or anything to get at this part of it. It's just. But
you should buy the book. I'll say it for you. You should buy the book. But go ahead.
Well, but the reason that I created it was, and it's actually been very useful in this regard, is because people have come to me and said, "Hey, my friend is being attacked. There's no way I can get him to read an entire book right now. Do you have anything?" And so I just thought, okay, well, what would somebody who is being attacked need? And so most of the guide is actually what you're asking me here. So for example, the very first thing to do, I say, is to rely on the 3 R's, which is recognize that it's happening, remain calm, and realize that no one cares. It's very important for people to understand that, other people don't really care about what's happening to you. Your really close friends might, your family might, but even they kind of figure, this wouldn't be happening if you didn't have it coming. And so, what the immediate instinct for most people is to plead their innocence and then run around telling everybody and their brother about what's happening to them. But that does no good whatsoever. In fact, it actually makes things worse. Then I also point out, you don't try to reason with them. The instinctive reaction when somebody accuses you of, having said something that was sexist or having done something that was racist, their first instinct is to try to deny it and explain it away. But that's missing the point. That's taking their accusation at face value. They're not accusing you because you did something and they're upset about it. They're going after you because you're a target, and this is just their weapon. This is just their tactic. It's like trying to argue with a machine gun or a sword. So don't try to reason with them. And above all, the single most important thing is do not apologize. If you apologize,
cannot emphasize this enough.
If you apologize, it is interpreted as a confession. It is exactly like, if you can imagine suppose the police bring you in and they accuse you of murder. And you go and you apologize for committing the murder. Well, they will view that as a confession and then will, pronounce you guilty and move right to the punishment stage. And so an apology is not, a normal person thinks of an apology of, hey, even if I didn't do anything wrong, I'm sorry that you're upset. I don't want you to be upset, so I'm going to apologize so that you won't be upset. But what they're doing is they're signing their confession of guilt to something that they didn't do. And so that's why it's very important never to apologize to SJWs.
The whole thing is so stupid, though. I mean, it's evil, yes, but it's so dumb. Like, their arguments are dumb, and the faux outrage is so dumb. It seems like it's so dumb that we ought to be able to counterattack a lot more effectively than we have. Don't you think?
But that's exactly what gets into the heart of the problem of dialectic and rhetoric. When a lot of the people who are most victimized by SJW attacks are highly intelligent people. I mean, for crying out loud, Sir Tim Hunt is considerably smarter than 99.9% of the people on the planet. He's got a Nobel Prize for science. And actually several of the people that I mentioned in there, in fact, I think pretty much every example that I have in the book is of a highly intelligent person being attacked. And the part of the problem that intelligent people have is that they don't understand the power of the nonsensical. They don't understand that 80% of the people only speak rhetoric. And so you can make the finest, most logical case in the world defending yourself.
Oh, no, look, I get that. I get that doesn't work. But why can't we come up with, we're clever and funny. Why can't we come up with stuff that smashes and embarrasses them?
Well, we do, and that's called what Milo does and what I do. And the main reason that we can't do it as effectively is because most of the people on the right, a lot of the conservatives and a fair amount of libertarians, are much too concerned about etiquette. They don't want effective names. They don't want the left being called effective names and being mocked and ridiculed and so forth, because that would be unfair, and it is unfair. It's not the sort of ridicule that Milo directs towards his opponents quite often is not fair, but it's funny and it's effective. And so as long as we've got tone police operative on the right, that's the biggest conservatism's biggest single problem is the fact that the tone police rule. And one of the reasons the alt-right is so effective is because we completely reject the tone police. And in fact, anytime somebody tries to start tone policing us, we shout them down.
Well, I'll tell you something. There are a lot of libertarians out there who will very, very grudgingly, in principle, recognize somebody's right to speak, but then make sure to engage in as much virtue signaling as possible to let everybody know, now, I don't agree with this reprehensible person. Let me make that into 4/5 of my article.
Right.
And then grudgingly say, but we have to allow, degenerates and deadbeats like this to talk. That, at this point, I feel like I'm going to forgive Milo for whatever transgressions of his I'm not aware of, and say that what this boils down to is you have to pick a side here. And again, my listeners, after over 700 episodes, they know that I'm as reasonable as you can get, in terms of I'm willing to listen to arguments and weigh them on both sides and whatever. So if I'm telling you that this is so bad and so severe that you got to just chuck all that out the window and just fight and ridicule, then something really is wrong. Now, what was the case of I want to mention the Firefox episode, because that's an example of after, what was the guy's name?
Brendan Eich.
Yeah, after he was basically driven out, or he resigned, but we all understand. We all know what that means. The share of browser usage that that Firefox enjoys among computer users went down substantially. There was a whole campaign among people who just didn't, whether they agreed with him or not, who cares? The totalitarian aspect of how his case was handled led to a mass campaign to uninstall Firefox, and they were hurt badly by that. It seems like we ought to be doing a lot more of that.
Well, we should be, and we are. I mean, Brendan actually has a great new browser out. He was the main technical guy behind Firefox originally. And so, that was why he was named CEO in the first place. And he's got a great new browser out called Brave. I'm using it on my system and on my mobile stuff right now. It's pre-release, but it's already better than anything else out there. It's important to support those actions, and a lot more of them are coming. We're going to be introducing an alternative Twitter, an alternative Wikipedia, all kinds of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on the alt-right that people don't know about yet, and it's going to be very important for people like you to let them know about it and let them know why it's important to do these things, rather than allow yourself to be subjected to SJWs like Zuckerberg and Jack, whatever his name is at Twitter. Right now the SJWs have the social media high ground, but we're going to take it away from them.
Well, I hope you're successful. Tell people how they can find your blog.
Just voxday.blogspot.com. Pretty much if you type Voxday into any search engine, that'll be the first thing that'll come up. And I think that, I would encourage anybody who is under any sort of attack by SJWs, please come by and please read that survival guide, because I think you'll find it very helpful. A lot of people have already found it very helpful. And the main thing that I would encourage people is don't be afraid and don't think you're alone. They want you to feel fear. They want you to feel like you're alone. But like the book says, they always lie.
Well, I urge people to check it out, both the book and your blog. I'm going to link to both of them at tomwoods.com/703. We're going to have to get you back as soon as I can get that Murphy on. I think Murphy debating you was the only time Bob's been on my show since we launched Contra Krugman. He's always juggling a lot of stuff, and I got to get him to put that stuff down and get him back on to talk some more about trade, because I really enjoyed that conversation, as I did this one. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome.
All right, I got another juicy one coming tomorrow. Before I tell you about that, I got another guy, another person who's a Tom Woods Show listener who has started a website through my hosting link, and so he's entitled to get mention on the show, plus a backlink, plus 24 free video tutorials. And I got that real goodie for just up until the very first couple of days of August 2016, a 35-minute screencast video where I take you through monetization strategies for websites that I myself have benefited from. So what's the site today that we're talking about? It is vacationsavings.com. So this is actually a business site. I've had a lot of libertarian blogs started up through my link. This is a business site, vacationsavings.com. And the tagline is, never pay retail for travel again. So you go to vacationsavings.com, you look around, and you can get super low prices for when you want to go on vacation, which is something I enjoy doing. In my old workaholic days, I used to actually resent time spent on vacation, if you can believe that. And now, since I've become more of a normal person, I actually look forward to going on vacation. So check out vacationsavings.com. We'll link to that on the show notes page for today, tomwoods.com/703, as the listener website mentioned. All right, tomorrow, Gene Epstein comes back to the show. We're going to talk about Adam Smith and whether his reputation is deserved or not, or what is the correct position to take on Adam Smith, because there are some people who just are slobbering all over the memory of Adam Smith, and there are others who say Adam Smith was actually represented retrogression in economic knowledge and thought. What's the truth of the matter? We're going to try to get to that in tomorrow's episode. Thanks for listening.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit TomWoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.